This is Michael Williams, and I'm here today with John C OLeary III. Thank you, John, for joining us here today. John is an excellent musician. In fact, I met him one night when he was out playing with his group, and I'll let him tell you more about that. He's also a neuroscientist, which is one of the reasons that we have him here. So thank you, John. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, music, your education, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here. I started playing music when I was 3. My mom was a concert pianist, and so I lived in that life. You know, she played with orchestras and she accompanied other people, and so I just lived in that. And she taught me when I was 3, and I've played the piano ever since. At some point, I wanted to be a professional musician, and it was hard because it's not a practical thing to do. And so to balance both sides, I was also going to school for science. So in college, I was doing a undergraduate in jazz piano performance on one side, and I was doing a double major in chemistry. I ended up just graduating with the jazz piano side, but I had I developed an injury in my arm, and I couldn't play, and the science became in handy because at that point I had to get a job or stay in school and figure out what to do, and I had enough credits in science that I could apply to graduate school for science. So the College of Medicine offers an MD for medical doctors. They offered a doctorate in physical therapy, but they also offer a PhD in medical research. And something that's was gaining a lot of traction and still very important was neuroscience. And so I said, wow, that's fascinating. I would love to learn how to learn about neuroscience and go to school for it. And it turns out that they actually pay for 80% of your tuition, and you get a stipend. You go for free and then some to get a PhD in neuroscience from any college of medicine, because you're working under a mentor, and you're working super, super hard, going to school and learning how to be a scientist. And so after 10 years of being in school, I graduated with a bachelor's in jazz piano performance and a master's and a PhD in neuroscience. My research and my specific area of expertise was in neurobiology, the cellular biology of neurons as they pertain in Alzheimer's disease, and experimenting with learning and memory and testing different drugs in learning and memory to find a treatment for Alzheimer's disease.
Fascinating. Now, let me just back up a little bit. Where are you originally from?
I'm originally from Mexico, from the Yucatan Peninsula. I was born in Mérida, Yucatan, Mexico.
Yeah.
And I moved here in 1998, and I've been here ever since.
Okay. Now, John, tell us a little bit about how your background in neuroscience has helped you in music in general and in life, and then we'll get into some specific things that we talked about. But just want to get your general thoughts on that knowledge that you've gained and how you incorporate it or use it in music. How you learn, how you test things.
Yeah. I mean, having a PhD in anything will it's a super valuable skill, and basically you're learning how to learn, because you go to school and you're in regardless of how much undergraduate courses you took in medicine and this or the other, you're going to be completely unfamiliar with whatever you're going in, because the way that medical science works is that each particular scientist is an expert in a very small and narrow field. And so you're learning, he or she has been doing it for longer than you probably have been alive in most cases, and you have to catch up, right? So this is like your day 1, and this is their day 30 years. And so you're like learning how to learn something completely new. You're learning how to write, how to communicate. You're learning how to test hypotheses, how to design experiments, and so it turns out that if you want to, you know, improve yourself, you do a lot of the same things. You have to explore something that you don't know
Mm-hmm.
about
Mm-hmm.
and learn about it, and either find somebody that knows how to do it or start experimenting and develop your own ideas on how to make it better. And
Mm-hmm.
so that has helped me, I think, a lot in just the way I think and the way I start uh, looking at how to improve a certain situation for myself.
Mm-hmm. A couple of key things that we talked about earlier. One is don't focus on when whatever it is becomes a habit. Focus on the process. So, as you know, I work with people who
Mm-hmm.
struggle with their speech. Could be stuttering, could be just fast speech. Then change that habit.
Yeah.
Also, with professionals and leaders who want to improve their presentation skills and so forth. So, one thing you said that I really liked as we were talking earlier is don't focus on like when it becomes a habit. A lot of people are like, okay, it's going to take me 21 days, it's going to take me 60 days, and they're just waiting for that day. But you said focus on the process.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, like, definitely when it comes to developing habits, um, it usually comes from the idea of, like, you brush your teeth. Most people brush their teeth every day at a certain time, usually in the morning, and before bed. Some people also do it after every meal or something, but it's like a routine that people have, right?
mhm,
Like, you have your morning routine, you have your going to bed routine, and you kind of don't feel right without it, right? And so a lot of people are thinking, well, how long do I have to do before um, I can just do something every day, like I do, like brushing my teeth or showering or whatever.
mhm,
And if you stop brushing your teeth, then it's not a habit anymore.
mhm,
So you have to just do it, right? And so it does become easier over time to do something every day. But regardless of how much effort you're putting in, there's still a base amount of effort. Like, you still have to get out the toothpaste and the toothbrush and open the thing up and put it in there. And it's not as big as a deal over time, but you still have to do it. And so the same is with anything you want to improve. Like, for me, is the piano, and I need to practice a lot and all the time. And if I don't practice, I sound worse, especially when I'm playing new stuff that I'm familiar with. And it's not about, okay, when is music going to become easy to me? It's about, how can I incorporate practicing into my everyday?
every day. Okay, now you just said something very important. Now, you've been playing piano for how many years now?
I am 30. I turned 32 this year, and I started playing when I was 3. So
29 years.
29.
Okay, 29 years. All right. So you would think that you've got the neural pathways there, that it's natural, but you said that, in fact, you said earlier that if you stopped playing for a year, you said that
Yeah.
you would feel and see the difference.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
right?
Your neural networks are labile, and the word labile means they're malleable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so your brain is constantly evaluating what to keep, what to get rid of,
Mm-hmm.
and what to make more of. It's constantly changing to your environment. So whatever environment you create, your brain is a representation of that environment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so obviously we all are unique, and we have certain uh, things that we respond to more than others, and
Mm-hmm.
some people or whatever. But definitely your brain is a representation of your environment. And so someone who is a cab driver for a long time has a much better visual spatial skills than someone who's not a cab driver.
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
unless you've practiced that kind of thing.
Right.
And so what you do changes your brain, and your brain is going to adapt to what you're doing. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I was talking about the process. I think instead of thinking about when will this be a habit, just focus on the process. Okay, when do I have to do this? Okay, and think about the recipe that you have. If you go to the gym one time a week, will that give you the results that you're looking for? You can try it. You have a routine. You can do your routine once a week, 52 weeks a year, and then you're going to evaluate at the end of the year, hey, did this work or not?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Luckily for you, there's been people doing exercise since the beginning of humanity, and they've kept journals and chronicles of how to do it. There's lots of people that can tell you how to best maximize your body in the least amount of time. You still have to go to the gym, and I guarantee you, the minute you stop eating correctly and the minute you stop practicing, your muscles are going to say, hey, we don't need to be big anymore because we're not being challenged, so you're going to go back. And so the brain is the same way. There's a lot of
Right.
correlations between skill and weightlifting. Your muscles will be bigger, the more you need. And your brain is going to adjust to whatever you're trying to do.
Right. Right.
However, in weightlifting, there is you do have a genetic. Your arms are not going to be as big as you're not going to keep getting bigger if you keep lifting heavier weights. There is a
Right.
limit, but we haven't found a limit to how much you can learn.
Right.
There's no
So
like that.
you mentioned that even if you don't formally practice every day, but you're playing every day to maintain the signal strength, if you will, in that neural network. That
Sure. I mean, there is definitely something to be said for doing something for a long time, but that's not going to make you good. You can play basketball every day for 8 hours a day, but that's not going to make you LeBron James. To be LeBron James, you have to have very focused and effective practice that is aimed at improving specific things,
sure.
and um, and you have to do those a lot. So you're constantly gauging where you're at in the different aspects, and you're trying to choose what aspects you're going to improve.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you need a coach or something to help you, um, or you do it yourself. You're measuring yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It may be that there is no coach in whatever you're trying to improve, and you're like a trailblazer, and you're just going to test out different theories, and you're going to work at whatever you can.
Yeah.
But yes, playing basketball, if you play basketball 8 hours a day, you're going to be better than someone who doesn't play at all,
Mm-hmm.
most likely. But that doesn't mean at all. There's no correlation between the amount of time you're doing something and how good you are at it.
Right.
There's a big correlation between the amount of specific, focused
Focus.
practice
Mm-hmm.
aimed deliberately at improving particular skills.
Skills. Yeah.
So there's a high correlation between that and how much you do that.
Right. Right. Let's talk about plateauing and regression. So people that might
Yeah,
be practicing something, then boom, they get to a place. Like I have a lot of students and clients
sure.
that they're working on it, they're practicing, they reach a plateau, they're stuck. Some
Yeah.
clients work on stuff, then the next thing you know, something happens and then they regress. What are your thoughts on plateauing? How do we break through that plateau? Then we'll talk about
Yeah.
regression.
Personally, between what I've read and what I've experienced is that a plateau comes from a model. Like whatever your recipe is,
Mm-hmm.
your model, your process, that's going to have some limitations to it. And you have to know what those are.
Mm-hmm.
And so, oops, I lost you there for a second.
Okay.
So that's going to determine there's limitations to everything.
Right.
right? Every experiment, every process, recipe, model has limitations. And so often when you hit a plateau, it's often because you're hitting the limits of your method. And
Okay.
so oftentimes you need a different method to get you different results. If you want to reach 10 people, you're going to do a different way than if you want to reach 1 million people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
could probably call 10 people in an hour and
Mm-hmm.
reach them and spread your message to them.
Mm-hmm.
But you cannot call 1 million people. I mean, how long will it take you to have a 5-minute conversation with 1 million people? You know,
Right.
5 million minutes, right?
Right.
So that's not feasible. And so, depending on your goals, a different method is needed to achieve that often.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to work harder. Most of the time, you need to work differently.
Differently. So how do you do that in your piano playing? Like when you're learning something and you reach a plateau, what do you do to to
I find a
change?
different recipe.
Okay. Okay.
And so, like I was talking to you about working mixed meter. And so, one way of doing it is to just, practice one way. And if one person will say, hey, I bought a lesson from one person, and they said it one way and practice it this way.
Mm.
And that's the way I practiced it. And I got a result from that. And then at some point, I just stopped seeing results from that. And so I found somebody else talking about practicing music that is of mixed meter. And they said, well, this is what I do. And then I practiced that.
Mm.
Um, and so, and then that gave me different results than the other. And so the only way to know if what you're doing is working is if
Mm.
you're measuring, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And so at some point, there may be a plateau. Often, it doesn't always have to be um, a plateau from your process. There's also plateau from your you may have a plateau within a practice session,
Mm-hmm.
for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That day you can't seem to be getting better at something that
Right.
day. Um, Sometimes that is just a matter of allowing your brain to grow with the training. Um,
Allowing your
and
brain to grow with the training. Yeah.
but I mean by growth, I mean to develop the neural pathways to reflect the skill that you're trying to work on.
Right.
And so, over time, you may see results versus short term. And so it's uh, the problem with plateaus is that there's a lot of there's short term versus long term,
Mm.
and you need experience and time to figure out whether it's your model or whether it's you just need to be patient. And so most of the time, most people are not patient, right? Our
Mm.
brain is not geared towards being patient. And so we give up too soon, too quickly, and we
Mm.
don't try something long enough for it to work. And
That's
so
yeah.
um, definitely there should be a time limit to decide whether something works or not, to see whether it's you need to move on to a different technique or a
Yeah.
different way of approaching it. um,
Right.
but the best thing that I would say is to find somebody who's done what you're wanting to do,
Mm.
and try to figure out how they did it. And so there's a guy named Anders K. Ericsson,
That's right.
and he is from Sweden. He is a psychology professor at FSU, and he's the premier expert on the science of expertise,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's his thing. He studies how people learn, how people become better, and
Mm-hmm.
how LeBron James became LeBron James, how Tiger Woods became Tiger Woods, how Mozart became Mozart. And he's found that regardless of what the thing is that a person is doing, golf, tennis, music, they all
Speech.
have speech, they all have an underlying uh, method for how to improve at things. And, his model is called deliberate practice, which is about specifically focusing on the targeting on one specific thing that you're trying to improve, doing it long enough for it to improve,
Exactly.
and finding somebody who's done it and do it. Like if you want to learn classical piano, there's a myriad of methods that have been shown and proven for hundreds of years to work, and so
Yeah.
you
Well,
don't
let
need
me.
to invent techniques for playing classical piano.
Right.
Now, jazz piano training, that's fairly new. That's less
Mm,
than jazz piano is less than 100 years old, at least the way we know it today. And so, there's different, so there are people who are experts at it and have an opinion on how to do it. And, I think the best thing is to find people who've done it, what you want to do, and learn from them.
yeah. So let me mention this, and then we'll take just a quick look at your thoughts on when we actually regress. So
Yeah.
the Pro 90 speech system is based on modeling, that is, looking at people who speak well and modeling yourself after them. We also have very specific speaking skills like modulating your voice and body language. So we drill down. We have deliberate practice for that helps us focus on those specific skills. So I think that we've created a recipe based on things that other people have done, modeling and deliberate practice that falls very much in line with what you just explained.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you about regression. So what happens when you're practicing and for some reason, maybe you have a bad experience? For example, people that I work with, they often have bad speaking experiences, and then sometimes they find that they just regress, they get worse. What do we do then? Like, let's say you're playing the piano and you just mess up, and then you become very self-conscious. How do you get yourself out of that mode?
Okay, so I think those are two different questions. There's
Okay.
regression in the sense that what you're doing is not helping you.
Okay.
And then that may be that you need to do something different.
Okay.
And there's making a mistake and feeling self-conscious about that.
Okay.
You're going to make mistakes and feel self-conscious about it. It's part of being human. Like, there's no getting around it.
Right.
So I've been playing professionally since I was 19. I'm 32 now, or going to be 32 this year. And I make mistakes all the time. And it really depends on how much time I've had to practice the thing that I'm playing. If it's a song that I've been practicing for a long time that I know really, really well, the chances of me making a mistake are a lot less than if something that it's new and I have to give a concert in 3 days for something that I just got the music,
Okay.
And so that plays a big deal in that. And so what to do when you're a professional and you're playing, you're speaking, you're doing something, and you stumble. You're going to be aware of it, and you have to train yourself on your reaction. And so you're going to have whatever your natural reaction, and that's going to be different for everybody depending on your genes and your experiences in life. Different people react to stress in different ways. And that's going to be unique to you. Whatever that is, you have to model where you want to be and where you are now. And maybe you're a great responder to stress and it doesn't faze you, or maybe you're not. And so what I've had to do is to learn to practice in safe situations so that when I make mistakes, I don't feel like it's the end of the world. And if I do, I have to take the time to monitor those feelings and learn to control them. Number one thing in music is you don't stop. You never stop playing just because you may be falling apart, but you try to keep going. And so sometimes you can't. That's okay. But you gradually grow to the point where if Yo-Yo Ma, the famous cellist, he has a thing where he says that he welcomes that first mistake, because oftentimes he feels like if the piece is so perfect,
Right.
then
Right.
it's like, oh my gosh, the one mistake is going to kill me. Like, I'm
Right.
going to be devastated.
Right.
So
Right.
he wants to get it out of the way as soon as possible. So then he's free. He's not worried about it. It's not
Right.
going to be a perfect piece anyways. So I
Yeah.
might as well just speak from the heart. And so if you're focusing on your intent, where is your intent coming from?
Mhm.
You know, if you're trying to impress people, that's going to be hard to do. If
Mhm.
you're communicating to get something across, your intent changes your focus. So
Right.
I'm sure that during this conversation, there are points where maybe you'll feel that I ramble too much. And you know what? That's okay. I'm not trying to have a perfect conversation with
Dang.
Michael. I'm just focusing on trying to create value for the people who are consuming this video, trying to create value for Mike. So my intent is on being useful. And
There you
you
go.
know, I'm from Mexico. I spoke Spanish for 12 or 13 years before I started living in an environment where I spoke English. So I speak a little funny. There's like a little accent, and sometimes the way there's when I listen to myself and I'm like, oh my gosh, I sound like that. That's horrible. But like if you're playing music or if you're communicating with somebody, the intent is to exchange an idea to another person.
Yeah.
And if you're focusing on your intent, you're less worried about perfection, and
Yeah.
you're more worried about, you're not worried. You're just in the moment. Allow yourself to just be normal. Like, and I don't mean normal like there's a certain way that this is normal, that's not normal. I mean, to get yourself to the point where you're not worried about the delivery. You have to practice to the
Right.
point to where it comes natural. Like I have a son, he's 3 years old. He doesn't speak normal yet. He doesn't have a delivery but when he's talking, he's not worried about whether what he's saying comes across or not. He's just blabbering, blah, 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 blah. And you
Right.
can't understand half of what he says, but his intent is there. And you can
Right.
see he speaks with a naturalness. Even though you can't understand what he's saying, he speaks with the intent is like, hey, Dad, there's a bug there. I don't want it to bite me. Or look, Dad, it's a snake, or it's a scary dinosaur. Or hey, Dad, I'm hungry. And so the most important part when communicating, whether emotionally or even for practical reasons, is the intent. So when you make a mistake, you have to train at responding in the way you'd like to respond.
Yeah.
So find people who respond well and try to measure that.
Yeah.
And so say, okay, videotape yourself, doing this. You'd be surprised when the recorder is on.
Yeah.
Like, it's completely different than
Right.
when the recorder is off. So even me, like, practicing at home, nobody, just for myself, I press the recorder on and the pressure is on.
Yeah.
And so it's like, just even that, like, I would say practice with a video camera. Take
Yeah.
your phone out, put it on selfie mode, and record yourself speaking,
Yeah.
and talk about anything, talk about your day, talk about your feelings. And you're
Right.
going to get to a point where you're going to feel that mistake coming in, and you're going to say, look at your facial reaction. How are you reacting to that? How are
Right.
you feeling? Monitor those feelings. Work at changing them to what you want to be. And like, I don't know specifics because I'm not an expert in that particular field, but the overall, anybody who wants to respond better at something has to work at finding an intervention, practicing it, and measuring whether that's working. And so when you make a mistake, you need a plan for dealing with that mistake.
Right.
Every professional, whether you're an athlete, a speaker, any performance professional, if your job depends on performing, you're going to have a plan for how to deal with a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
And over time, it becomes natural to you. You don't even have to think about it. Like, this is how you will deal with this mistake.
Right. Right. Wow, very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. I love this idea of intent and value. We talk about that, and you didn't even know that that's one of the things that I talk about. You said the
Oh,
exact. I mean, I'm serious. Intent and value, and then we talk about some other things. So that was extremely valuable for me too. Now, something else that we talked about earlier was resistance. That when we're learning something new, like I play around and mess around on the piano, I speak a little Spanish. So both of those things are skills that I'm learning. Right, I can probably speak Spanish better than I can play the piano, and I'm going to start.
that's
I'm
awesome.
going to start working with you, actually, on both of those things. But
Cool. Let's do it. Let's do
but
it.
but we talked about resistance, that resistance that you feel, and you mentioned at least two or three different, well, at least two different types of resistance, physical and emotional. Talk about that a little. So as
Yeah.
people are learning to change the way they speak, they're going to experience resistance. Say something about
Yeah.
that.
Well, again, I, f- I feel that part of being human is to encounter resistance.
Mm,
And whenever you learn something new, if it's something that that does not come easy or natural, and that you're working hard at it, then that's a good thing. Because if it was easy, then why are you practicing it?
hmm
The point of practicing is to improve. And as a musician, and having students, and I see people all the time who they practice, and well, they're practicing, but they're not getting out of their comfort zone. And so if you want to improve, you have to get out of your comfort zone.
Comfort zone.
So if you're in your comfort zone, you're not improving. And
Mm,
so if you're practicing, quote unquote, and it's super easy, then you're not practicing. So resistance is a requirement for improvement.
okay. And you talked about, so there's that, well, let's just, there's physical, I'm calling it physical, but you talked about emotional resistance where you just don't
Oh,
feel,
right.
say
So there's
something,
physical resistance, right? Like,
right?
you go to the gym, and then how many people go to the gym? A ton. Everybody goes to the gym, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not everyone has big muscles, or not everyone has six-pack abs.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't do it long enough, hard enough. Most people quit before they get to that point. So
Right.
whatever you're practicing, you have to practice like twice that or more. Like, you have to work really, really, really hard to see improvements. And that's the way your bodies are designed. That's the way our brains are designed. It wants us to improve, but man, you really got to mean it and want it. So number one,
Yeah.
so that's the physical resistance nature of doing things. Number two is there's an emotional resistance.
Mm.
Like, I don't want to go practice the piano today. I don't want to go to the gym. Like, I don't feel like it. I don't want it to hurt. I don't want to get out of bed. Like, that's part of, your brain is not your friend. Okay. Your
Mm.
brain wants you to eat sugar. It wants you to stay on the couch watching
Mm.
House of Cards all day long. And so you have to recognize those feelings, and know that you have to do the exact opposite.
Right. So,
So that's where you have to you have to think, okay, I feel like not practicing,
right.
but I know that the only way I'll get better is by practicing. So to that, I would say, you know what? Here's a short hack for that. Start practicing with the goal of only doing it for 5 minutes.
Right.
That's it. If you're like feeling such internal, I don't want to do it like really badly, say, hey, okay, I'm going to do it, but only for 5 minutes.
Right.
And you're going to realize that the inertia, that overcoming that inertia of like not wanting to do it, only takes that. After 5 minutes, you're going to be like, I could do this in another 5 minutes. I could do this for an hour.
Yeah.
And so, but if you still don't feel like doing it, at least you practice 5 minutes. That's better than nothing. And so, but trust me, like, I've never sat down to do something that I was going to practice for 5 minutes and then not finished it.
Right. Excellent. Yeah. Again, you said something that we talked about, and I'm not even going to repeat it. I just want people to watch this and to listen to what you just said in terms of how to overcome that resistance, that it's natural. And one strategy for overcoming it is exactly what you just said. I used to trick myself into doing things like I wouldn't feel like doing it, right? So let's say it was some kind of homework or something. I'd say, okay, I don't feel like doing this. Let me just sit down and just get my papers together or just get started a little bit. And then I'd do that and I go, okay, well, let me just do a little more. And then I would end up doing it for
Yeah,
15, 20, or 30 minutes. I would trick myself.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And another thing I think is you need the carrot and the stick.
Mm,
So, like not only do you need positive reinforcement, you also need negative reinforcement. And so, like for the gym, for example, you can take a picture of your fat self and give it to your best friend and say, hey, post this on Facebook if I don't achieve my goals. And, whatever. In 25 weeks, I want to lose, 25 pounds
right.
or whatever it is. And, I suggest small goals over time. For me, the best results I've ever had with anything is small goals over time. Because you're gonna go with that mentality, you're gonna crush that goal, and it's a small goal, so you can do it, and then you're gonna kill it. And then you've improved a little bit. So now you can take next week and improve a little bit more, and then 100 weeks later, you're gonna be awesome. And like for me,
Yeah.
the best results I've ever gotten with anything is to just consistent improvement over time.
Mm, mm, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like there's nothing stopping you or anybody from achieving just about anything. Sure, we may not be LeBron James, we may not be Steph Curry, but man, you can be so much better than you are right now at just about anything by setting small
Well,
but difficult goals that build on themselves week in and week out. And
yeah.
the first week you're gonna be like, well, that was easy. The second week, that was easy. The 20th week, you're gonna be like, look at what I achieved. Oh my gosh. The 50th week, you're gonna have 50. Imagine like doing something for 52 weeks in a row.
Mm,
Like that's hard. Like it's hard,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so the time becomes your friend. Like the longer you do it, that small improvement, it's almost like compounding interest. It's a little bit and a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, and over time it becomes your life savings.
Compounding. Yeah, that's powerful. You also mentioned the word marathon, that look at
It's
it like a
yes,
marathon, not like a
yes,
sprint.
life, at least for me, it's a marathon,
Yeah.
you know, and it's not a sprint. And so like, yeah, I'll get personal on you. I was trying to find ways to better express my love to my spouse. And I really love this book called The Five Love Languages.
Oh
And it
yeah.
talks about
Yeah.
a recipe for communicating love to your spouse.
Yeah.
And my wife uh, loves, she hears and feels love through actions. And very specific actions. She wants me to take care of things that stress her out. And if I take away those stressors, she feels love,
Right.
right? And so that's not my natural state of being at all. I I live in mess and filth, and that makes me happy. If I have 100 books on the floor and there's like the carved outline of like a snow angel where I live, like that's my life. Like I always lived that way, and that was great for me. And I was like, what do you care if I keep my books on the floor or not? And then if I go out and clean the house one day, great. I sprinted. I worked 8 hours, 10 hours, 24 hours. I made her that thing that she wanted to happen. Now feel loved forever. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But if you, over time, take the time to speak your spouse's love language, you build a great relationship. You
Right.
start creating positive emotional equity in that other person's
Right.
brain. They
Right.
love you because they feel loved. And then, man, that stuff comes back to you. you know? And so like you can do that with every relationship, with your customers, with your friends, with your dogs, and even your dogs will love you more if you treat them good, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, and so that's how I approach everything. Anything that I want to be great at, it's going to take a lifetime to develop, and drip by drip, you know, the hardest thing to do is to be patient.
Yeah.
And I found that that if I try to make big goals in short amount of times, I usually don't succeed. Some people love that, you know, like
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, there is a thing called Parkinson's law, that
Mm-hmm.
a task will fill in size to fill whatever time space you give it. So let's
Exactly.
say that you want to write a paper and you give yourself 5 days, you're going to take 5 days. And if you give yourself 2 days, you'll find a way to do it for 2 days.
Exactly.
And I think that definitely works to a certain extent. But for example, for losing weight, that did not help for me. I tried really hard because what I needed was not I wasn't just writing a paper. It wasn't like there's no thing when it's done. I think Parkinson's law works better when there's something that's done.
Done. Right.
Like, I'm going to write a book. Okay, it's done.
Done.
I'm not
Yeah.
writing the book anymore.
Right.
But for like being a healthy person, you need to be healthy every day of your life.
Right.
You know, so like with practicing your speech,
Speech.
you may have to practice for the rest of your life. And, you know, that may be what you need to do. But if you do it, then it will get better.
It'll get better.
You know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the gym, for example, if you stop going to the gym, your muscles will get small. If you stop practicing the piano, you will not be a world-class musician if you stop practicing, period.
Exactly.
I don't know a single person that is world-class at anything that didn't spend a tremendous amount of time and energy and continue to do that to stay in peak form. You ever hear about athletes talking about form?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm not in form to do this. Or like even chess players say, oh, I'm not in my peak chess form. And what that means is that they haven't been practicing a lot lately, so they're not in the best shape possible. And so like, I think performance, anything that's performance, anytime that you have to perform, you have to work hard at that performance.
Yeah.
And you know, you could go and try to understand why we're in this particular situation, but I think it's much more productive to take, it's like playing poker. You take the cards that you have, and you're going to try to play the best hand that you can with with that hand, you know?
Yeah. And we'll wrap up with this last question I have for you. Something that you mentioned, because a lot of people struggle with just fear and avoidance, and you've kind of touched on this already. But
Yes.
Sometimes they avoid practicing. Sometimes they avoid speaking to people in public. Right? They avoid meetings. They avoid introducing themselves. I have experience, and I know how that feels. For example, in speaking Spanish. So I know that I'm going to want to avoid speaking Spanish to someone because they might say, oh, well, he's just learning. What is he saying? But I actually push myself to actually speak it because I know that by facing that fear, and if I do it continuously, I'm going to actually lower my resistance, lower my fear, and improve my skill, improve my ability. What do you have to say, and how have you dealt with the fear, like avoiding things because you're afraid of how it's going to feel or afraid of failing? So.
Yeah. Fear, man. Fear can definitely affect. It will. I don't know a single person that's never felt fearful at some point in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Again, fear is a very unique thing because each of us is wired differently. Mm-hmm. Our brains, some people may react to fear more than others. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. But it is definitely something that you can train and become better at. Mm-hmm. So it goes back to the basics of training. You know, Anders Ericsson has that book, Peak, The Secrets of the Science of Expertise. And he has, you know, his the things that makes something practicing a good practice. And so I, definitely get that book, and you just practice. You put yourself in a situation where you're going to be scared, and you apply a method for getting less scared.
All right, so we're back here with John. His phone died, so we're just going to keep rolling.
Oh, sorry, guys.
And pick up where we left off. John was just kind of talking about facing fear, and you were talking about Anders Ericsson.
Yes.
And ways to go ahead.
Yeah, what's worked for me is to I remember being really scared about failing in a particular performance situation or a song or something. And I used to write in a 3x5 card, like when I had this really bad anxiety. And anxiety is also a neural pathway. We start developing anxiety to feel a certain way, and you can learn to mitigate those feelings by self-talk, and you're going to lower your anxiety by your self-talk over time by practicing positive talk.
Wow.
And so there's this book called Reinventing Your Life or Reinventing Yourself. I'll get back to Mike, and I'll give you that specific Michael, I'll give you the specific title so you can share with your audience. But it talks about, basically rewiring your brain so that you don't feel anxiety. Man, I had a lot of anxiety when I was a teenager, and especially my late teens or early 20s. And this method of using a 3x5 card, it reminded me of what I was supposed to think and feel, and I would work really hard at feeling how I wanted to feel. And so, I would say, right now, I know that I'm really anxious about this outcome. However, I realize that in the big scheme of things, my life is going to be okay regardless of what happens here. I have these positive things going on for me, and this is a small micro thing in a big macro life. And so
powerful.
By changing that frame of feeling over time, over years of practicing, changing my frame of mind, it became more natural to feel less anxious. Also, anxiety and fear are very unique to the individual. And I think the best thing you can do, especially with anxiety, like fear, real fear is important, right? It's kept us alive. Real fear is like, hey, I'm going to hit this car. Hey, here's a person with a machete chasing me. Or, hey, here is a bear. I need to, that's real fear.
Right.
We almost do not experience situations in life where we actually have real fear. It's most of the time is anxiety. Exactly. We're anxious that X thing might happen, but we don't know. There's not an actual bear chasing you. Right. That's fear. We're scared that a bear might chase us. Right. That's anxiety.
Right. It's not impending. It's not impending danger.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Impending danger. Listen to that. That's really important. That without impending danger feeling, you wouldn't be here. Your ancestors would have never lived for you to be here. And so that's really important. But anxiety, man, one of the best things you can do is just sit with it. You ever been anxious? I remember being a teenager and texting a girl or calling and then waiting for them to call me back. Did they get the message? Did it go through? Did I say it right? Did I say, maybe I should call? Yeah, I should call again. So 5 phone calls later, you're blocked and they'll never speak to you again. Right? I definitely had that feel. I remember that. And from that, I realized that, you know what? You need to sit with the anxiety. Seth Godin talks a lot about that, about fear versus anxiety. And man, just sitting with that anxiety, don't do anything about it. You can't let your brain's like a toddler. If you acknowledge those feelings, then it's going to give it more to you. If you acknowledge a toddler's bad behavior, they're going to do it more. And so in that same way, you just have to be like, I'm scared that this is going to happen. So what?
Right.
You know, you take out your 3x5 index card and it says, I am anxious or scared that, you know, maybe this person is not going to like me anymore if this happens. If I make a mistake, they won't want to listen to me anymore, like for my music. Or maybe if you stutter, you feel that a person won't want to be your friend anymore because whatever reason. And say, hey, you know, if I fail at this conversation, this is just one little conversation in a grand scheme of living a long life of an innumerable number of conversations that you will have throughout your lifetime. Yeah. One failure is just getting you closer to one success. Exactly. And as long as you're working towards becoming the person that you want to be, failure is a good thing because it means that you know whether something's working or not.
It's giving you feedback.
It's giving you feedback. The worst that happens is when you have no feedback, because then you have no idea.
Right.
You know, if you have an angry customer, that's a good thing because then you know what to do. You know what to fix. You know what's wrong. If you have a happy customer, great. You know what worked. You know what went well. And it's the same with whatever you're doing. You know, and so I think success or failure, they're the two sides of the same coin. It's just a feedback on whatever you're working on. Yeah. What's hard is when you don't get any feedback at all. Right. And so if you look at the long term of every conversation you're going to have throughout your life. I mean, my grandfather lived to 92. He passed away 2015. 2015, I believe. Yes, he passed away in 2015. And he was 92. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary. Imagine when we're old enough to be 92, medicine is going to be that much better, right?
Right.
Like medicine is going to be better than it was for him. So I don't think it is unreasonable to think that you could possibly live to be 100 years old.
That's right.
Think about how many conversations you can have from today until you're 100. And you have all that time to work on becoming the person that you want to be.
Right.
And one small conversation is so little compared to a lifetime of conversations. It doesn't seem little at this moment, but it is. Yeah. And so by training yourself to see the big picture with, you know, training your mind, you're going to change those neural pathways from feeling anxiety to feeling calmness.
Right.
And that takes time. So you have to train your speech. You have to train your anxiety.
Yeah.
If you want to feel less anxious in life, you know, you can definitely train at it.
Wow. Well, John, Dr. John, thank you so much. There's so much that you've said in here that this is a treasure trove of knowledge. And I'm going to get this out to everyone, and we're going to make sure that people watch this. I also wanted to give you a chance. We're going to put your website where people can get your music. If that's something that you like to do, I'd like to
absolutely. That'd be great.
Website. I love John's music. He plays all kinds of stuff. The style that I particularly like is the jazz and Latin jazz. And so whenever I go to see you, John, you always play my favorite songs and stuff. So
absolutely. And also, I also talk a lot about science. It's an integral part of who I am and what I do. As a musician, as an artist, I try to find the intersection of music and science. And so my current project is to write music that is inspired by topics of science that I think the society needs to have conversation about. And so my concerts and my music becomes a platform for having a conversation in my community about science.
Yeah. So we're going to do this again. Probably we'll be focusing on, just maybe one specific topic. So it'll be a little shorter, but we'll get some topics that you and I both are passionate about and that's relevant to our audiences. And we'll do this again.
I would absolutely love that.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure, Michael.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you inviting me, and I hope that this is useful.
Entonces yo voy a hablar en un español un poco.
Sí, hay que practicar. Dale.
Muchísimas gracias por pasar este tiempo con nosotros y por compartir todo. Muchas gracias.
El gusto es mío y muchísimas gracias por la invitación. Espero el momento que lo podamos hacer otra vez.
Yo también. Gracias.
Gracias,
John.
Michael.
Okay. All right, John. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time, Michael.